What's up, STS Nation? My favorite day of the week. It is your True Crime Friday. Welcome to another episode of Surviving the Survivor, the podcast that promises to bring you the very best guests in all of true crime. And today, it's a show so good we do it every Friday. Great Scott, it's time for your True Crime Fil with Fil and Scott. Our best guests, America's most respected detective, Fil Waters. He spent decades in law enforcement, becoming an expert at obtaining criminal confessions. He spent 117 years, to be precise. I'm tired of reading these years every week. So it was 117 years that he spent in law enforcement. He looks great for his age. He investigated more than 400 homicide cases. He's also a Marine. He's also the owner of Kindred Spirits Investigations, and he's also the star of the show, The Interrogator, which he wished was called The Interviewer. And then we've got Agent Scott Duffey, the voice of reason with the mellifluous voice. He is the director of Wilmington University's Criminal Justice Institute, who never gets any hate mail. He is a retired FBI agent from Delaware. He worked violent crime matters, gangs, bank robberies, and fugitive task force cases for 20 years. And prior to that, he was a police officer in the great Commonwealth, not the state, but the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. A quick reminder, you can find us also on Facebook and Instagram, anywhere you listen to podcasts. You can support us at Patreon and become a YouTube member. And the chief marketing officer has the merch store open. And for those interested, you just click on the link anywhere, including YouTube, and it should take you to the merch store. So there is actually quite a bit of news coming out of the world of the evildoer in Idaho. Moscow, Idaho, to be specific. As you all know, like to remember the victims of this case: Madison Mogan, 21, Kaylee Gonzalez, 21, Xana Kernodle, 20, and Ethan Chapin, 20. May their memories be a blessing. But there is some news out of there, and my friend and a friend of the show, Kevin Fixler, he is the investigative reporter with the Idaho Statesman. It's always good to support local journalism, but he has been on top of this case from day one, and he's got a couple of stories that broke this week. First, there was a lot of hubbub, if you will, about the surviving roommate, whose initials are BF. There was a lot of back and forth about the defense wanting to interview her and basically serving a subpoena, which would have forced her to go to this preliminary hearing, which is a mini trial come June 26th. It ended up that it's not the case, but Fil Waters, was it a surprise to you that there was, number one, a subpoena for her to appear at the preliminary hearing, and number two, that there was a major fuss over this? She's in Nevada. Obviously, the trial's in Moscow, Idaho.
I don't know that I would call it a surprise. I thought it was unusual. I mean, this is a preliminary hearing. This is where there's going to be a determination if there's enough probable cause to move forward. And this was kind of I don't know, maybe it's a little Hail Mary thing by the defense attorneys, because I even saw where they were claiming that this witness provides exculpatory information regarding their client. And, with all the other direct evidence and the other circumstantial evidence that we know about, I don't see how one witness testimony is going to be exculpatory, which means that he's not guilty of what he did. And interviewing this particular witness at this stage, I don't know. I think it's a little bit of posturing on the defense's part, and I'm kind of wondering what the scope of the gag order is that they would come out and make some of the statements that the defense has made. And so now I did read somewhere, I don't think I imagined this, that the witness in this case has agreed to be interviewed. So they're going to get that done without a subpoena, because they were doing the whole deal about going to subpoena her, make her testify at this preliminary hearing, blah 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 blah. So not surprised, but find it a little bit unusual.
Yeah. Ketchup weighing in from lovely South Florida, where it is absolutely monstrosity of a rainstorm, and there's a 50-50 chance I will be booted off. I'm getting payback for making fun of people in colder weather areas. It seems like it has rained every Friday. She says, happy Aloha Friday to the real Magnum PI and the best viewers. You can say that again. STS Nation, hit the like button. I love it. We're going to get to this, too, because this is part of the news from Archangel. How about no gag order? His defense is getting busy. Area residents, taxpayers deserve updates. So and we will get to that in a moment. Scott, to you. So, according to Kevin Fixler's story, the great investigative reporter with the Idaho Statesman, BF, through her attorney, has agreed to do an interview with Idaho Defense Counsel in Reno, Nevada, in lieu of proceeding forward with a subpoena. That's what this filing Wednesday in the Second Judicial Court in Washoe County, Nevada, stated. The deal was apparently struck on Wednesday, and now because of this deal, the defense has vacated a subpoena that was going to be issued to her. But as Phil stated, Kohberger's defense team asserted last month in a court filing that BF, one of the two surviving roommates, she has information that could show he is not guilty, aka exculpatory evidence. Scott, what on earth could that be, that one person has some sort of information that is so relevant to the case? Because Detective Waters says, that there's so much that is piled up against him. Do you have any idea what this might be?
I agree with Phil. I think there's a lot of posturing. It's coming from the defense, so they're doing everything in their power to put on a defense, and where they can, through leaks or whatever have you, to avoid that, or get around the gag order, to put out information to make it a story. Hey, stay tuned at 11. Our guy is not guilty. So prelim hearings are, they can be lengthy, but pretty much they are, hey, prosecution, put your best case forward, what you have. It's pretty much adopting the affidavit that's, the arrest affidavit, the search warrant affidavits, put them forth, attest to them. There will be some defense questioning, but ultimately, prelims are just the beginning. And they are, even though I've seen and have heard them called mini trials, they typically do not have witnesses outside of prosecution. It's the prosecution's way of putting forward their case officially and on record, and they're not going to put their witnesses beyond those of the police officers and the affiants. So it's a stay tuned to 11. I can't imagine what they have other than, at the end of the day, I think we'll see a little bit more, and you'll probably hear less when they go and interview this victim, and there probably, won't be an aha moment, but it will be, hey, maybe the eyebrows weren't as bushy as they once were thought to be in a moment of panic. So I can't imagine what would come from this.
Great Scott. It is the bushy eyebrows defense. Tali in the Holy Land. Happy Global Friday, SCS. I just want to take a minute to appreciate you, Joel, for an amazing show, Phil for amazing shirts, Scott for great headphones, which he's not wearing anymore. You make Friday better, the best of guests. Fil Waters, Kevin Fixler goes on and says in his story, it is unclear what the defense believes BF may know that could pertain to the evildoer. A criminal investigator, this is why I bring this to you, Phil, a criminal investigator hired by Ann Taylor, the public defender, wrote in a March legal filing that he learned that details BF possesses are exculpatory, meaning they negate his guilt. Portions of information BF has is exculpatory to the defendant. This investigator, Richard Bettoni, wrote and said that BF's information is unique to her experiences and cannot be provided by another witness. You own Kindred Spirits Investigations, the greatest PI firm in all the land. What was this guy doing, this private investigator for the defense? When was he doing it? And what do you think he could have found that's so, potentially incredible for the defense team?
Well, this is the defense's private investigator, and this is what his notes say, and so forth and so on. Number one,
correct.
I'm going back to this gag order thing. Why is this information even being released? That's my question there about, is this a violation of the gag order? But the second thing is, I tell you what, there are many private investigators out here with a lot of experience. There are private investigators with no experience. There are private investigators that are mediocre in what they do. There are private investigators that are hired guns that just go out and they just find and interpret and analyze the whatever they find so that it will fit the client that they're getting paid by. I don't do that. In fact, I work civil cases. I work criminal cases. I do surveillance. I work divorce cases. I work child custody. I work all manner of cases. And I tell my clients from the beginning that I'm going to be straightforward with them and I'm going to be honest with them, that I'm not going to be a hired gun that's going to give them the answer that they're paying me to give them, so that they want to hear. And I have had some pushback on that from a couple of clients that just did not want to hear the truth. And they unfortunately moved themselves into a position of just being delusional, just not wanting to hear the truth. And that's frustrating. Some of those people still owe me money for the work that I did, but that's kind of the nature of the beast here. And so I don't know what he was doing when he was writing this down and all that kind of thing, but that's a pretty bold statement.
But Phil, pull back the proverbial curtain, if you will. Let's just say hypothetically, you were hired by Ann Taylor, the public defender. She hires Kindred Spirits Investigations in December. Where would you start with a case like this? What would you be doing? Would you be FOIAing records? Would you be going to talk to police officers? What would you be doing?
Well, I would be examining the discovery, all the discovery that they have, and I would be conducting my own investigation. So I would take what's in the reports, look at this crime scene photos, interviews, and so forth and so on, so that I can get a full scope. And I'd be looking at it objectively. I'm not looking at it as though the evildoer is the guy. I'm looking at it as, from the beginning, these are the pieces of evidence. This is where this evidence is leading me, and so forth and so on. So I'm going to go in and reinvent the wheel. And I tell you what, I've had cases that I've gone in and I have done just that and have gotten dismissals in criminal cases because the investigation was just poorly done and the evidence led in a different direction. Now, I don't know. Again, this person, don't know what their experience is. That's just what I was going to say was, for him to make those kind of notes, given the evidence, at least of what we know, and that's all the prosecutions are not going to go into this preliminary hearing and present their case. They're going in there to present enough evidence to show that there's probable cause to let this go forward. So, these defense attorneys are trying to turn this preliminary hearing into the trial, it sounds like to me. But going and interviewing this particular witness, which is what I would do, That would be part of the process. But to come back with this kind of a bold statement in the notes that what this one witness is saying in this big picture of evidence is exculpatory, I can't imagine, unless they're the ones that actually did it. I mean, that would be my, I did it, he didn't do it, and here's what I can show you that proves that I did it. So I don't know, that's a pretty bold note in those notes. I don't think I have, in fact, I know I've never written anything. I've never written anything like that into notes that I've taken when I'm talking to a witness. So it's a strange, kind of a strange event. Of course, this whole case has been kind of strange from the beginning. So
who else gets this kind of insight about the world of private investigations? You only get it here on STS. Imagine owing Fil a lot of money, and then you bump into him at the mall.
No,
Phil's at the mall shopping every week, and it would be scary. I wouldn't want to owe Fil money and then bump into him. Astra brings up a great point. I'm glad she did, because this is something that I actually forgot to include in my notes. But there were reports, I guess, that the United States Attorney General's office is helping the prosecution now, that the state has gone forward and asked for additional assistance since this is a death penalty case and they need some more help. Scott, does this surprise you? And what would the United States Attorney General office be doing that's different than, or resource-wise, it's different?
So that could be a couple of things. It could be, for example, the FBI, we know early on was involved. So the FBI is going to seek search warrants through the U.S. Attorney's Office, and ultimately they fall under the Attorney General's office. So any time that a federal agency is involved and utilizing federal resources and ultimately getting federal search warrants, etc., subpoenas, those are going through the local U.S. Attorney's Office and ultimately under the guise of the U.S. Attorney General's office. And there must be certain permissions that are granted from the Attorney General's office that will allow those documents then to be provided for a state prosecution. So that could be one, just helping and getting the proper authorities to release those documents. And then ultimately there could be a secondary, which is what if in fact there is anything, a glitch or whatever have you on the local level, and so thereby a federal parallel investigation could be conducted. So that way, if you have evidence supporting that this case had interstate commerce, for example, not everything took place in Idaho, planned in Idaho. You have several different states, for example, leaving Pennsylvania to go to Idaho, and then of course in the different state neighboring Idaho, where if Kohberger plans and leaves a location and travels to another state, thereby this is an interstate aspect of the whole crime. So it's possible in those two that simply the Attorney General's office is going to say, hey, FBI, you can release all your documents you've obtained in support of this case for state prosecution. We give you permission. And then, of course, if something were to go awry in the state prosecution, that the Attorney General's office is running a parallel case, so that way there can be something pursued. And that's done many times in civil rights type cases. There would be a state homicide and then a federal hate crime. And so there could be both and both prosecuted without any type of double jeopardy, et cetera. So that's what I'm guessing is with regards to the Attorney General's office being involved.
Joel, I don't believe it's the U.S. Attorney.
No?
No. I believe it's the State Attorney General's office.
Oh, maybe. You might be right.
There is no federal nexus on this case.
Okay. So
although everything that Scott said is correct.
Yeah, no, I stand corrected.
just not in this case. I believe it's the state attorney general's office. They've had 2 from the criminal division at the state level that have been assigned to the local prosecution.
Thank you for the correction. I need them often. Thank you.
I'm
Catherine,
just showing that I am prepared for this discussion.
Yes, Phil, please come prepared. That's what STS Nation expects. Catherine Regier writes, Aloha shirt, Scott. It's Phil Friday. Good morning, Joel and STS Ohana. I love it. Coming to us from Kauai, I think. Happiest of Fridays to all of STS Nation. After discussing somber things, let's all resume our happy Friday feelings. By the way, I'm from Jersey, so I say O-U-R. I pronounce it R-A-R-E. I don't know why. I've always done that. And then I had a news director who used to yell at me for saying it that way and would tell me to always think of rhyming it with like an hour's worth of time. So I have to remind my brain to say hour instead of R because I'm a Jersey guy and it irritates me that I have to do that. Abby ha. Hi, STS friends. Happy Friday. Abby was having a rough day yesterday, Phil. She's missing her father. Any words of wisdom from the man she wishes was her adopted father?
Well, I would tell you, I'm glad to see she's here. I'm hopeful that she isn't rethinking our relationship, and I did notice in some of the comments on YouTube that there is another young lady who has made the note that I'm the father that she wished she had. So there may be I may be accumulating a whole new a branch of the family tree here as virtue of STS Nation.
And Phil, you know what that means? That means you're going to have to buy a minivan. It comes full circle.
Never will happen. I'll get a military Marine Corps 6x before I get a freaking minivan.
See Phil riding around in one of those SUV, military grade SUVs.
Oh, by the way, did you get that picture that?
You know what? I will have it next week. I have it.
I
just don't have it in the system, but I will get it next week.
We gotta put that up, man.
Abby sent a photo.
That's gotta go on a T-shirt or something.
We're gonna do that.
I have not lost my sense of humor, by the way. So
no,
I thought it was great.
Your friend, Fil Waters, Nancy Grace, you've heard the name. She came out and said the following about this whole debacle, about this preliminary hearing. And she says, if you look at the filings by this defense attorney, Ann Taylor, it's nothing more than a stunt. I wish I could do a Nancy Grace impersonation, but I can't. A stunt that is terrorizing a survivor of this brutal slaying. In fact, in motions like this, it's called domestication of an out-of-state subpoena. You must state why the witness is material, why they've got to try to travel all the way from Reno, nearly 700 miles back to Moscow, Idaho, to testify for the man that the state believes killed her roommates. They say she may have information. That's not enough. So this is a stunt by the defense. Do you agree with Nancy?
Well, I was on Nancy Grace on her radio thing, her online.
That does not surprise me at all, Phil.
And that's the first time I've been on there with Nancy Grace, and she's different. You really gotta. It was an interesting experience. It was fun. I mean, you got to get past this is her shtick, right? But I would have to agree with her. I think I kind of alluded to that in my first comments about this thing. I just think they don't have a lot to work with here. And this kind of goes to me, this threatening to get a subpoena, to get them to testify at this thing. I don't know. That's a real fine line to tampering with a witness, in my view. I don't know that they've crossed that line, but I would tend to agree with Ms. Grace. I think she's accurate with that comment.
Kathy P. in Arizona, friend of the show. Hello from sunny Arizona. It is not sunny in Florida today. Thumbs up. Yay for Scott and Phil. Hi, Scott and Phil. From Teresa in sunny Ireland. We had another. Look at this. Venter, good evening, listening from South Africa. We live in a truly remarkable world with our global audience and perhaps the most exotic locale of all and the closest to me and my heart. Listening from New Jersey, Linda Caputo. I love it. And then we don't forget Pittsburgh. Everyone in Pittsburgh is nice, by the way. Very nice people come from Pittsburgh. And I'm just looking at this other question. So there's Kevin Fixler again is all over this. You guys should support him. The Idaho Statesman, local news is what makes all the news happen. Really, I can tell you that from being a national news guy, we get most of what we report from local reporters like Kevin Fixler, and he had a story today that he broke in the Idaho Statesman. Not a massive story, admittedly, and he even said that, but it's important, and that is the Pennsylvania school district where Brian Kohberger attended. He graduated from a place called Pleasant Valley High School in 2013, is now being forced to turn over his student and employment records. This actually happened back in January, but it's just being brought to the forefront today. And that was after correspondence between attorneys and administrators at the Pleasant Valley School District in Monroe County, Pennsylvania. Scott, any surprise that we don't know who requested this, whether it was the state or the defense, but any surprise that high school records are being subpoenaed? And what would be the relevance of knowing what kind of student he was or reports written about him at that time?
Yeah, it's all relevant. Whether or not it plays a part in the actual trial will all, I guess, be determined by what is actually in those documents. If I'm sure they're going to get everything from grades to any notes that might have been taken that went into a file, any disturbances, whether as a student or as an employee, any type of arguments, any type of harassment complaints, whether they were founded or unfounded, investigated or not investigated. You're going to see that well beyond just this high school. I think you're doing a deep dive, and I don't think it matters whether it be the prosecution or the defense, or they could be both going after the documents. Ultimately, they're both going to be shared through discovery. So it's not a surprise whatsoever. I think it goes to show due diligence if it is the prosecution that's leading the subpoena efforts or search warrants, whatever, to get these documents, not only from the high school, but from any work site that or job that he's held, wherever he has resided, including where he was residing and working at the colleges. So it's no surprise to me, and it shows due diligence in getting everything imaginable, so nobody is surprised come trial.
And Phil, we got a little inside baseball here. So I suppose Kevin was able to FOIA some email exchanges at the school district, actually. And this is between the attorney and the district school leaders. And the attorney says, we cannot just turn over his student records without placing him on notice of this. Attorney Mark Fitzgerald said this in a January 20th email to school district leaders. My suggestion, the lawyer says, is send a notice to the jail in Idaho indicating that we intend on complying with the subpoena. Obviously, this is the least of his problems, but we need to adhere to the law here. Kind of interesting just to get the inside take here, but obviously the school district they're dotting their I's and crossing their T's here, right? And making sure that they reach out to the defendant to let him know what's coming his way, right? You're shaking your head, Phil.
Well, I don't. That is the weakest freaking thing I've ever heard. I mean, really, look, they gave him a subpoena, respond to the subpoena with the information that was requested, period. This business about notifying people. And if that doesn't work, then get a court order, get the judge to order them to produce those records. I've never heard of such a thing. I mean, that's absolute freaking nonsense. So maybe that's a school policy, but that school policy doesn't override what that subpoena or what that court order from a court directs. So that's a bunch. Is that their attorney that's
Yeah, this is
all
the
that
school.
stuff?
This
The school district's
I
attorney?
presume it's the school district's
Well,
attorney. He's what they call CYA.
he's earning his $200 an hour, whatever they're paying him.
Yeah. So this is an interesting comment, Scott, from Andy School, a friend of the show, who I believe may have been in law enforcement. I need to find that out from Andy for sure. But he says, "Happy Friday, STS. Hey, Joel, Scott, and Phil. The subpoena, this is going back to the BF subpoena, the surviving roommate, worries me for BF's well-being. Is there anything prosecutors can do to ensure her utmost safety? FBI protection, possibly? Is there anything that they do have to do? I mean, there are weird people in this world, and her identity is out there. I'm purposely just using her initials, although a lot of media outlets, are using her name now. Is there anything that needs to be done to protect her?"
Yeah, this is the age we live in where pretty much everything is out in the media. And once somebody's name is given out, if it's a unique name as opposed to a, John Smith or something like that, it may be somewhat easy to then find a residence, and then you have media camping out, etc. There's really not a whole lot that could be done. Of course, prosecution is very much interested always in the safety of its witnesses, and those discussions always happen in the camps of discussions with investigators and prosecutors as a case progresses. We've taken great strides. Typically, we will talk to the witnesses and say, is there something that you need to help you feel comfortable? And ultimately, I've never really, maybe other than one or two times, where we've gone through some means to move a witness temporarily. That just means going to a hotel and then us footing the bill. But ultimately, investigators are talking to the victims and witnesses, and investigators are getting the real information, and they are making assessments. It's one thing for someone who's not a part of the case to be nervous. But when an investigator talks to a witness or a victim, they're typically saying, "I got it covered. I'm good," and don't hesitate to reach out to us. And then, of course, many states prosecutors, if not all of them, have these victim witness assistance coordinators that can provide resources available. But ultimately, I think for the sake of the subpoena, and it's already been vetted through, and Phil has discussed, it's a long shot. And so they're, and if they're going to go and conduct an interview, it's going to be a moot point. Could the FBI provide resources? Yes. If the state prosecutor's office says, "Hey, we're low on funds," and an immediate request, and then ultimately a need for some sort of witness relocation. But I would not think at this stage of the game.
Jay Taylor weighing in, listening in the Boston, and then Dr. Vonda K. Hi from Kingsport, Tennessee. We're covering the whole map. So Phil, oh, by the way, where did this go? Someone asked me, oh, here it is. Here's this question from Julie Thru in the UK. Did anyone see Brian Walsh in court yesterday? I did, and we're going to talk about it momentarily. So I'm glad you brought it up, but there's some more evildoer to get through here. So Fil Waters, Detective Waters. As part of this reporting, we find out that the evildoer was a quote-unquote pretty decent worker, a person that knew him at the time, and this is for the school district. He was a pretty decent worker. Remember, he had a security job, always there, not one of those guys who would show up when he wanted to. He was quiet in a strange sort of way, but nothing that ever really reared its head with us. And then we go on to find out, this may have been reported previously. It likely was, but I don't remember hearing this. In December 2018, the evildoer was credited, Fil Waters, with helping save the life of a district staff member after she had a medical emergency at the high school. What a weird juxtaposition. He's credited with helping save a woman, yet these 4 brutal homicides are pinned on him here. Does any of this stand out to you?
Not really. I mean, you've got to take, you got to take everything in context. So at the time, whatever was going on there, he felt the need to respond. I mean, at what point in his life does it have a date of when this is occurring?
This was in December 2018.
Okay, so we're talking
4 years
water
early.
under the bridge since then. So we're talking 5 years ago, and he's at what age is he at that point? 20.
He was 20,
22,
28. No, he was like 24, maybe
20,
roughly.
24, 23, 24 years old.
Yeah.
And we don't know where he was in his life in terms of what he was trying to accomplish. Was he still trying to get into law enforcement in some way? I mean, he's going to school at that point, right? So he's working on criminal justice things. So that, I mean, good for him if he helped that woman. I mean, good for him. That's a positive. But unfortunately, sorry about that.
There it is, the bozo horn. The bozo horn.
Sorry about that.
Bill has received a text message.
Yes, I have. So, okay, but sorry, but I forgot to turn it down. Sorry about that. The little comic relief here. So so we got to look at it in context. What he did then had to be a different mindset in that period of time 5 years ago, and something occurred within that 5 years that has caused him to have allegedly done what he did with these young people. So I don't find that to be terribly revealing, but it will be something when this thing goes to trial, if he is found guilty and they start to go into punishment. Now, in Texas, there are 2 parts. There are 2 tiers of the trial. You have the trial, then you have punishment if they're found guilty. So I'm not sure what the structure is in Idaho, but at some point in time, this may be used to try to mitigate sentencing if he's convicted. So you got to throw it all in there, though, right? I mean, it needs to be part of the total picture. And this all goes to what I've talked about before, that I, as a detective, when I get a suspect, I want to do a psychological autopsy on him. And so this is all part of that process in determining the type of person that this particular defendant is.
Phil makes a good point. It could be for the death penalty phase. And they could say, hey, our client saved someone once, spare him his life. So we'll see. Sarah writes, hello from Lisbon, Portugal. This podcast is more educational than a Netflix series. Thanks for the consistency. That's because you got Fil and Scott here, which is pretty incredible. Sunflower Girl, STS Nations, Nation Fridays with Fil and Scott. What is this comment here? I think he is so guilty, but I generally presume anyone that makes it to trial is guilty. No jury duty for me. Definitely not, Carrie G. It's supposed to be a presumption of innocence. You have it backwards, but I fear that most people think the way you do. So who knows? Scott Duffey, the Idaho Supreme Court this past Monday rejected a request by 30 news organizations to lift a gag order in the criminal case of Brian Kohberger. He is the man, as we know, accused of stabbing 4 University of Idaho students to death. The High Court did not weigh in on whether this gag order, which prohibits attorneys, prosecutors, law enforcement agencies, and others involved in the case from talking to the news media, violates the First Amendment rights of a free press. Instead, it was a unanimous Idaho Supreme Court decision. They said that news organizations should have brought their request to the magistrate judge who issued the gag order. So a technicality, it sounds like there. They brought it to the wrong judge, but needless to say, the gag order remains in place. I don't know. Is this a good idea, a bad idea? Did people feel like they're not getting transparency as a result of this?
Yeah, I know there's two sides to this, and you can probably make an argument for, release the information versus hold back on the information. So, but I'm also a proponent of whatever needs to stay close to the vest needs to stay close to the vest, and there are reasons unknown to us. They could be for safety, they could be for, hey, we just don't want the information out there to jeopardize the trial. And I think everything will always come back to, we don't want to jeopardize the trial, and that's ultimately where final justice will be sought and provided. So, yes, it is nice to have information. It is nice to kind of form an opinion of where that information is going to take the case this way or that way. But Idaho stated right from the beginning, and they're sticking to their guns with regards to, we don't want information out there until it's made it to a court. The preliminary hearing will be a point in the case where a lot more information will come out, and there will be a lot more information that we don't have outside of the affidavit. But Idaho, this is Idaho, and they're very protective of that information, and they have laws in place. So I can see, Supreme Court saying, hey, on a technicality, they'll probably file again in the right court, but it does buy them time, and so the gag order remains. So,
Perhaps the most pertinent question of the day right now from Julie Thru in the UK. What's the sign behind Scott's head? I see a B and an N, I believe. Scott, what is it? Would you like to reveal it? Beach. Beach. It's an H. Ah.
that should be a hint where I'm at.
He lives right near the beach. Are you in
No.
Rehoboth? Can we
No, so I'm live from Cape May.
Oh, I love it. Live from Cape. That's New Jersey, everyone. Love it. And look at this. She is live at the beach, Carpe Diem, watching from Maui, one of Phil's favorite places.
Aloha.
Gina Feddersen in the Virgin Islands. Elf says, my favorite voice, Scott. Gina says, soothing Scott. He's like a Ricola cough drop, Scott Duffey. He's as soothing as a Ricola cough drop. Another reason Ricola should be advertising on my show. Moving forward here to Detective Waters and FBI agent Scott Duffey. Brian Walsh, we remember him, Scott and Fil. They now say that he was the sole beneficiary of a $2.7 million life insurance purchased by his wife, Anna Walsh, Fil. He suspected she was having an affair with a coworker before he allegedly killed her and dismembered her body. And listen to this, Fil. It could have been you. According to Norfolk Assistant District Attorney Gregory Connor and a statement of the case filed in court, Walsh suspected his wife was having an affair with his mother's financial assistance. Oh, not with his mother. Was having an affair and with his mother's financial assistance. God, little words make big differences. I always tell my kids that. So the wife was having an affair, and with his mother's help, with his mother's money, he hired a private investigator to follow her around Washington, D.C. Fil, my question to you, why does Brian Walsh or any man or woman think that killing their spouse is a better idea than getting a divorce? Do you have the answer to this question after your 117 years in homicide?
Well, I say repeatedly, it's either sex, drugs, or money. And so this was sex and money. And to answer your question, Joe, I have no idea. I sit here and look at these guys. The minute that thing even started, look, he's got he looks like he's kind of a Casper Milquetoast looking guy. He's weird anyway.
Fred Flintstone,
and he gets hooked up with a very attractive, I believe she's Serbian. very attractive gal who's smart, who has apparently a very good job, which causes her to travel. He's some guy that's one of those guys that's always had an idea about something and never come to fruition with it. And so he gets a wife that is, and this is just my speculation. So before everybody gets their panties in a wad, this is just my speculation that perhaps he thinks that she is a possession that he never thought he would be able to possess, because she's kind of the antithesis of him, right? I mean, he's not a very attractive guy physically. She is very attractive, and she seems to have the brains. He seems to be kind of he's probably smart, but what he's stupid about, he's really stupid about. So therefore his decision is, instead of getting a divorce, I'm just going to kill her and cut her up and dispose of her. That'll take care of the whole thing. And then I see where the attorneys for him are trying to, that he was cooperative and so forth and so on. And that that's why he should be given a bond. And of course, I think the judge ended up ruling that he be held without bail. So,
I mean, but Phil, psychologically here. So on the one hand, he's like, oh, wait, I can get $2.7 million. On the other hand, he went into, I think, a Walmart or a Home Depot. It was a Home Depot. And you see him literally leaving with like shovels, plastic bags.
Yeah.
I mean, where is the disconnect? Like, does this guy just not live in a world, I mean, of reality? I would say to myself, hey, idiot, you're going to get caught. Just get a divorce, but why is there this disconnect always where the person is like, okay, let me cash in on this insurance claim, but I won't think about the fact that I'm 100% getting caught and now spending the rest of my life in prison, and I can't spend any of that money. Why are they not taking it to that next step?
Well, because they're not thinking, period. I mean, they're obsessed with this immediate thing that's going on with them, and they're going to resolve this issue this way. And they're already calculating, or think they are, they're calculating the story that they're going to offer, and then it is somehow going to be believable. So they kind of manipulate. I think in this case, I think he tried to manipulate her going out of town with where he was and that kind of thing to try to put together this story. But I just have not seen any of these work. There have been some that have been delayed. Justice has been delayed because the story was so, I mean, I've seen some of these guys that, killed their wives, murdered their wives. The wives are missing. They're the best possible suspect, and they just don't have that one piece of evidence that puts them into getting them indicted. And that's frustrating for detectives. I've been in that situation. So it's very frustrating when you know the person who did it and you just cannot get that. You hit the wall. You just can't get that one piece of evidence that would put you over the edge to getting them charged and getting them to a trial. So I don't know. I think they just become obsessed with resolving the issue for them. And this is going to be one of these that if I can't have her, nobody's going to have her. So therefore, the way to accomplish that is to go to Home Depot and start buying shovels and
get caught on camera.
Implements to resolve the problem.
Lorna McKenzie, I want to be adopted. Phil, you're setting off a major trend here. It's going to cost you a lot of money, Phil, so you better start collecting on the people who owe you.
I'm going to have to build a bigger house.
Yes, you will. Astra writes, Scott should become a therapist. The perfect voice and demeanor for it. Scott, does your wife agree with these comments? Does she think your voice is soothing?
My wife's a social worker and a nurse, so
Oh, there you go. See, that makes perfect sense, actually. She's a good woman, you can tell. Carrie G, let's go take a half step back. Phil always teaches me do not ask close-ended yes or no questions, but in this case, I'm purposely going to do this. Do our esteemed guests believe that this is BK's first kill slash crime? I know he's being investigated potentially for other crimes. Phil, yes or no? First kill, yes or no?
Yes.
Scott Duffey, yes or no?
Yeah, I do believe so.
Wow, he gave me a few extra words, but okay. So moving on here, Scott. Back on December 26, 2022, a year ago and change. No, it wasn't. It was just this past December. Brian Walsh's mother, with his input and direction, I can't say anything about dysfunctional mother-son relationships, but it sounds like this one was a little bizarre. Hired a private investigator to conduct surveillance of Anna for the purpose of proving infidelity, prosecutors wrote. And then on top of that, it is revealed that he is now indicted, of course, arraigned on charges of first-degree murder in this case. The only thing he did in court was he shook his head no as the charges were read, and he uttered not guilty. And the defense came out and said, Scott Duffey, defense attorney Tracy Miner says Brian Walsh was not in need of money because he had a very wealthy mother, and he would not have orchestrated life insurance fraud to obtain this money. She went on to say that Brian Walsh's mother is wealthy and had given tens of thousands of dollars to Anna and to Brian. So the defense trying to make this all about money, but to Phil's point, this is really, what do you think, a crime of passion?
Yeah. You, like Phil said, you have a combination of things here. So, the anger, the passion over a suspected cheat, right? She's gone with somebody out beyond me. And then, of course, where I've seen it time and time again is you have these major life insurance policies that just happen to be changed or updated or increased, and then you have missing person homicide. So, somewhere in the How to Get Away with Murder handbook, it's probably not being followed by many of these very short-sighted individuals. And but tens of thousands of dollars doesn't go very far, does it? It's especially in today's market, but it's I would imagine it would be nice that he would want to have his own money outside of
Scott, also, like with a crime of passion, where is the delineation? Because he obviously, according to all the evidence presented thus far, seems to have premeditated this too. I'll give you an example. I was a senior in high school, and my high school principal's daughter was dating a guy, and she tried to break up with him, and he showed up at the house, and they started to have a fight. And my principal, Mr. Donahue, may he rest in peace, tried to break up the fight, and he was stabbed, a single stab wound, and he died. And it was major news. It was on the cover of the New York Post since it was a Jersey school. But that was something that happened in an instant and was over. But here, there seemed to be some planning, right? Where he hired the investigator, he was watching her. So is there any kind of delineation there when it comes to a crime of passion, that this seems to be a little more premeditated?
Oh, yeah, definitely. There is a difference. And so you do have that something that happens, somebody snaps. And so that's going to play into it. That the evidence is going to be there. And so it's still murder, but it would be, the prosecutor would look at it as a lower grade. Here you have a combination, but what is the primary motive? And so there has to be something that's going to lead to, I no longer love, I no longer want to be with this person. And they can say, I don't like what they're doing to me. And so I've fallen out of love, and now I hate this person. And so there is that rage, there's that passion, but not enough to snap. And now it's okay. Now I'm going to figure out how to best get out of this. And it's not going to be a divorce. It's not going to be, that's going to be costly for me. So let me see what else I can do to increase my future earnings, and so that's where the mistakes are made. I'll up the ante on the life insurance, and so that's planning and that's timing. And instead of using that time to say, you know what, this is a lousy idea, and why am I even thinking that? But there is evil, and so they make a evil choice, and that is to uproot, murder, and get rid of somebody else on this earth. But so you have a combination of motives. You probably don't want to play into one or the other too much, but follow where the evidence is going, and time and effort and money is a good motive. And if the evidence supports it, go down that road. But they're definitely planning and putting the necessary tools in place to follow through with a plan. Yeah, 100%.
I don't want to open up a Pandora's box here, Phil, and I can see Phil growling here. Skin care Carrie. She does appear to have glowing skin. I would love for you to respond in real time, Phil, and I would love everyone to be happy and kumbaya world. Good thing Phil is not a lawyer, but he may need one soon for all the sick comments and accusations at Brian Kohberger. What happened, Phil, to innocent until proven guilty? He's law enforcement, so he's above the law. I can barely. Phil, I just want to give you a fair shot to respond in real time. You could also respond to this comment. Sensory combustion looks like a goat exploded on Phil's shirt.
That's funny. That's good. I like that.
But
we have a lot of goats on the Big Island, so that means that's special to me right there. So who is that? Sensory combustion.
And I'm trying to pull up.
Excellent comment.
But
I appreciate that.
Yeah, and this is the one from Skincare. Do you
want
to?
Okay. Well, I used to jokingly say, "How can you break the law when you is the law?" But and that's a joke for everybody out there. That's a joke, In regards to this statement here, well, number one, I'm not worried about. I guess what they're alluding to here is that because of my comments that somehow I'm going to get sued by the evildoer.
Yeah, I think we've got bigger things to deal with.
So what I will say, but in regards to this innocent until proven guilty thing, and I've explained this before, because we've had people like this that are confused about what that means. So the presumption of innocence is guaranteed by the Constitution. It is a legal presumption. In the courtroom, it is a legal presumption. The burden of proof is on the prosecution. It is not the defendant does not have to prove his innocence. So I want to make that clear. What I am saying, I am making an assessment of the case and the person and persons involved based on my experience and having worked over 400 homicides. So that is the difference in my opining about my views and my perspective and my analysis of these cases, not just this one, but any of these cases we talk about. And I'm not going to speak for Scott, but he does the same thing. He just does it in such a calm way that nobody gets offended, which is great for him. And I think that's what makes this show so great. So we've kind of got, hot and cold here, right? And I think it's wonderful discussion. I find a lot of humor in it that I get criticized, and Scott sits up there and agrees with everything that I just said and doesn't fade any heat at all. But I appreciate that. Scott's my wingman, and I'm good with that.
I got your back. And if I could interject there, that's exactly what this is. We are professionals who are making speculations based upon what information is provided. And next week, information could change that. And so thereby we would make new speculations, right? This is the fun, but at the same time, real life experiences that are put forth saying what we think would be the next step in something. And so I would vouch, as long as I've been on here with Fil, he's never, and we have never as a show, pointed the finger at anybody. We are speculating one way or another where the evidence is leading. And that's ultimately, we all know that it ultimately comes down to a jury, and a jury will make that decision regardless of what we say or don't say. So,
and they have 313 years combined experience in law enforcement, so it's a lot. Sunflower Girl says Phil's bozo horn cracks me up. It cracks everyone up. Cheetos says, in response to what we were just talking about, presumption of innocence if there's not as much evidence as there is. And Cheetos is going out on a limb here, saying, after all that evidence, I'm presuming he's guilty guaranteed. So that is the court of public opinion right there. And that is, you can't stop people from thinking so that way. And that's what they do. Mary Ann Bird. Hi, Joel and best guest from South Mississippi. I've been listening to your show since the Murdaugh trial. Always interesting and insightful conversations. Thank you for your show, Mary Ann. Thank you for coming and watching us. Thank you. And look at this.
Let me say something real quick about Walsh again.
Yes.
Walsh had some legal problems going on at the time as well.
Art fraud.
What's that?
It was art fraud. Yeah, he was.
Yeah, so he's got a whole bunch of other issues, and we don't know what was going on within the marriage there. Whether she was, she was about done with this idiot. Now she wrote some things, I think, in some of the preliminary hearings with the art fraud stuff, or maybe what he was going to plead, whatever's going on there. But she did write, I guess, for lack of a better term, a character reference for him. Talked about when they had kids. I mean, there's a whole lot of stuff going on in this guy's life at the time. And then if you add to that the thought that she's having an affair and he's got a PI following her around, private investigator, following her around, and they are able to quantify that. They're able to show that, there's something going on here, even if it's by inference. She's seen with the same guy in different settings, maybe not in the hotel, maybe not, the ramshackle bouncing bed motel, but certain things that are indicating to him that, yeah, she's got something going on. And that was just the last straw. That was just it. And in regards to this passion thing, as Scott has already talked about, there is passion in it, but it is not a crime of passion, because this has been building for a long time. And he finally decided when he was going to do it and how he's going to dispose of her. So this was all a planned event. This not one of these, I'm in a situation where I walked into the bedroom and there she is in bed with somebody, and I pulled a gun and I shot her. Now that would be a crime of passion, and that would be left up to the jury to decide whether or not it did meet that criteria. So I've had a murder case that was a situation. Of course, the defense was arguing it was a crime of passion. The jury determined that it was not, and he was found guilty of murder. So, there's a lot of things going on here with Walsh, why he did it, reasons behind it, the planning, and the execution of it.
Amanda says, it's Amanda from Brooklyn. I'm a retired NYPD sergeant. Thank you for your service. I live in Naples, Florida now, and in all caps with exclamation marks, I love Fil.
Well, thank you, Amanda. Thank you. I appreciate that. I really do.
Followed by Lorna, wish I lived near the beach. So I told you guys this before, but I'm not hard on my kids at all. I just make my 3-year-old hit about 3,000 forehands and backhands a day. Make him hit a heavy bag. He's got 2 choices in life: become a professional tennis player or the UFC 155-pound champion. But now that I've been interviewing Scott and Fil, and I see Hawaii and beach homes and Ferraris, I now instruct my 3-year-old to either become an FBI special agent or a detective, a homicide detective. He now has two other choices. So he is making up his mind. He looks at me a little puzzled because he can barely speak, but is what it is. I've learned a lot from Fil and Scott, and I know what they need to do. Moving on from Brian Walsh. There's a guy named Bob Lee. He's the Cash App founder, and he was stabbed and murdered. He died. He lost his life. Not so dissimilarly to the story I was just saying about my high school principal, William Donahue. May he rest in peace. He was murdered in 1987 when I was a senior in high school. But Bob Lee, there's information that has come out about this. He was reportedly that night, Fil Waters, visiting the home of a suspected drug dealer in the run up to his death. He was stabbed to death in the early hours of April 4th, having allegedly been led to a secluded spot by his killer before the attack. It's thought that he visited the dealer's apartment with the sister of the man accused of his murder, and that man is 38-year-old Nima Momeni. Phil, this seems like a very overprotective brother that was looking out for his sister and took the law into his own hands. Does this start to really clarify this picture of what happened this night to you?
Well, yes. Sex, drugs, or money. And here we go. Sex and drugs. So the brother is he's very protective of his sister, according to the reports. And what I have read is that he not only suspected that this Mr. Lee had taken his sister to the drug dealer's location, but he was also having a sexual relationship with her. I think there was some question that he asked, what's going on? Is there anything going on? So that would allude to the fact that he was.
And they were, just to be clear, they're both married. And
yes, to other people.
Yes. The woman that he was allegedly having an affair with was married to a prominent plastic surgeon. But of course, this guy was a very prominent tech CEO. But so then we
got a lot of money. We got a lot of people with money on either side of this. And but you know what? That just makes them turds with money, right? At the end of it. And so we've got the different vices involved here. She may be involved in drugs and so forth. Anyway, the brother. Now, one might consider this to be a crime of passion. Since we're contrasting, we can kind of compare and contrast here.
Yes.
This one, I would say not, and I'm just basing it on what I know and what I've read. This one we might consider to be a crime of passion. Because my first question was, when this thing happened, was what is he doing at that location at that time of the morning? So now we know. I think that was the apartment complex where the sister resided, if I'm not mistaken, with her husband. And they get together, the brother and Mr. Lee, and it would appear that the brother is confronting Mr. Lee about the night's activities with his sister and Mr. Lee. And so they go to a remote location. I believe it was in the brother's car, if I'm not mistaken. Was that, am I right about that? Do you know?
I don't know where the actual crime occurred, but I know it was in this kind of
I thought I read somewhere where they were in the brother's car in a BMW. Maybe that was another case. But
they may have been. I think originally they said it was an Uber, but I honestly don't know at this point.
Okay. Well, however they got there, they got to a remote location. They got into what appears to be a very heated discussion. The brother accusing Mr. Lee of these things with his sister. And either Mr. Lee told him the truth and it pissed him off, or he continued to deny it But at this point in time, the brother is so consumed with his anger about what may have been occurring that he stabs Mr. Lee to death. And I think in that setting, if that was how it kind of culminated, that we could call that or categorize that as a possible crime of passion, contrasting it with what the other case the Walsh case.
Does this mean that, potentially he could get a manslaughter charge instead of, let's say, a homicide charge and a lesser sentence as a result?
Well, sure. I mean, they could determine that this was in fact that and charge him with a lesser charge, a manslaughter of some kind, a voluntary manslaughter charge, or they could charge him with murder and let him plead to a lesser charge, or they could go to trial and have lesser included charges in the deliberation with the jury if they find him guilty. So there are several ways by which he could end up with a manslaughter. And I guess it just remains to be seen. But I think from what little I know about the case, I think his defense is going to be crime of passion.
Nain Aguero writes, love this channel. Thank you for the content, panelists, hosts, and the chief technical officer too. Thank you. I'm so hooked into the thoughtful, insightful dialogue on the topics. Thank you. Appreciate that very much. So putting a little bow on this part of it, Scott, the story did go on to say that there were claims that this woman, the sister of the accused killer, was involved romantically with Bob Lee. She, meanwhile, as I said, was married to a plastic surgeon. Now, the apartment that they were allegedly both at that evening, the one he was having an affair with, and Bob Lee, is reportedly home, this is your world here, Scott, to a man who was convicted last year of felony possession of a controlled substance with intent to sell. Police had previously arrested the occupant for having an alleged range of substances, including meth, cocaine, ecstasy, acid, and magic mushrooms. Should this guy even have been back out on the street less than a year later? That's question number one. And number two, their defense is already sort of hinting at him being an overprotective brother. He is from Iran. He was raised there till a certain age, and there's cultural differences. Will that come into play at all?
Yeah, will come into play. It all depends what it actually converts to in a courtroom. Like, for example, what Phil was saying with regards to the charges and so forth. But and from what I've read this morning with regards to the type of drugs that this drug dealer is in possession of or selling it, combination thereof, are extremely dangerous, hallucinogenic drugs, right? So we're talking about some highly addictive, life-changing drugs. So you have, going back to what took place here, you have a brother who's extremely protective. You have a brother who is watching out for the welfare of his sister, not only wanting her, probably doing everything in his power culturally, religiously, just as a good brother, trying to steer his sister back to whatever that path that, in his mind, he would rather have her be on, both, through fidelity and of course being drug free. But you do have a combination. You have, regardless of whether Bob Lee is involved romantically or taking her to a drug location, perhaps both doing narcotics, Bob seems to be that last person that is in a play of both worlds here. So, yes, it will all come into play, and into if ultimately what happens with the brother and the type of charges that may or be updated or whatnot. What will come through this with the brother seems to have done his own homework with regards to his sister, knowing where she's been, perhaps, doing his own surveillance and coming through, hey, I made up my mind here, and this is what I must do in order to protect my sister. I just have to weed out. So, who knows what would have been next if, why not the drug dealer versus Bob Lee? But ultimately, he made some, if everything comes out to be true that's being said, he made these decisions. From what I gathered too, it was, stabbed with a kitchen knife, as opposed to a knife utility knife you have in your car. So it's, there's some thought there. Okay. I don't have kitchen knives in my car. But I have, early on in my kids' days, brought kitchen knives into my car because I made sandwiches before I go into the beach or something like that. It will be up, and as Phil said earlier, that it ultimately comes down to prosecution has to prove their case. Nobody has to prove their innocence. So, it will, all that plays into, and you have multiple vices taking place here. And it seems like the brother believes that his sister was just on a downward spiral and doing what he could do to take her out of that by removing some of those vices.
Well, and the drugs involved in this thing are, to me, they're kind of significant. It was meth, I think, and cocaine, methylene dioxymethamphetamine, commonly known as ecstasy. And I think they even threw in some magic mushrooms in there. So those types of, hallucinogens and drugs that are used to increase the sexual gratification stuff. So then you have the other aspect of this, that maybe Lee was having an affair with his sister. So, evidence leads you to where it leads you. And this is all part of the big puzzle.
We're going to wrap momentarily. Look at people coming to Phil's defense. Gentile, your opinion always counts, Phil. Followed by from Vermont, love you, Phil. Like this comment going back to Brian Walsh, a shovel and garbage bags are cheaper than a lawyer.
Well, that's true.
In the short term, I suppose. Elf has my back, says hit the like button. But look at Happy Wife here. Ironically, she says, my divorce took 4 years and I was harassed for 8 years after. Sorry to hear that, Happy Wife. But
that happens a lot.
Domestic violence is very real, and getting out is the toughest thing. So it's a bold for you to come out, Happy Wife. Followed by David, the trifecta of true crime. Joel, Fil, and Scott. Great show, guys. Very quickly, because yours truly has a hard out in a few minutes today. This was a phone call with just a little dab of Lori Vallow Daybell here. There was a phone call played in court this week, Fil and Scott, and it was between Lori and her youngest sister, Summer Shiflett. And Summer says to Lori on this recorded call that was played in court, Lori, if you let this happen to them and put them in the ground like a piece of trash, I don't know you. We would have taken them. Summer is now screaming at Lori, you cut me and mom off for 4 months. Now we find out this, and you expect me to just keep going with zero explanation, and you expect me to just keep believing without ever having a question. This is a very personal conversation that was played in a very public environment in the courtroom. Fil Waters, in your opinion, this case is moving much quicker than they anticipated. It could be over as soon as this week. Yeah. Is Lori Vallow Daybell's fate sealed? Will she be convicted for this crime?
I would say yes.
Can you elaborate with one more sentence as to why? There's just an abundance of evidence in terms. There's a conspiracy charge and the murder charge. And this is what got some people riled up yesterday. We had a guest on, Wendy Murphy, who's a very smart woman, who says she doesn't see enough of a link, at least from the murder side, for the murder charge, possibly from conspiracy. But Phil, will she be convicted of conspiracy and murder?
Well, I haven't seen or heard all the evidence, all the witnesses, and so forth and so on. I would say, with some degree of confidence, that she'll be found guilty on both. If she is not found guilty on the murder, I don't see how they don't find her guilty on the conspiracy. She is, from everything and again, this is one of these strong circumstantial cases. And I think the prosecution has done a very good job painting the big picture and then getting focused on what her part in all of this was. So I would be, but you never know what a jury's going to do, of course, but I would say, based on what I've seen, what I've heard, that I think the jury comes back with convictions on both charges.
Scott. Summer says to Lori, there's nothing okay about this, nothing. And it goes on. And Summer says, I'm telling you because I love you with all my heart. Please consider that Chad has lied and been deceived, and you've been deceived, and this is not what you think it is. There's nothing okay about killing children, nothing. And even if you didn't kill them, and Alex didn't kill them, and Chad didn't kill them, you threw them away like garbage in a pet cemetery. What was striking to me about this exchange is she sort of gives Lori an out. She says, even if you didn't kill them. In their heart of hearts, do you think this family believes that their sister, their daughter did commit these crimes, do you think?
I think so. You have, it's one-sided conversation. You don't have Lori saying, oh, you're right. I confess. I wish I didn't do it. They're one-sided conversations of a family member or friend saying something, and they're just getting out their own disbeliefs and their horror, and then of course maybe even placating themselves a little bit, just to feel a little bit, hey, I wish you had come to me. And they want to say that, and of course you have a prison tape, but it's, with regards to the conspiracy of murder, right? I mean, you have tremendous circumstantial evidence. You have it makes sense. How could one be without the other? I could easily, though, see a conspiracy conviction without a murder conviction. And I don't know with regard specific to here, but I know for us, if we couldn't actually prove the murder or the crime, could we prove the conspiracy that they knew what was going on? They didn't do anything to stop it. And if they weren't the actual hand in the actual crime, where they have a part in it, but partook in the plan leading to and then everything afterwards with the burials, a conspiracy would carry the same amount of weight and time. So, I'm not sure specific to the way Idaho does it, but they're heavy charges, both the conspiracy and the murder, and I don't think if she were to actually be convicted of the conspiracy and not the murder, that she wouldn't carry the same sentence. So it's still very heavy charges having both, and it would just it would bring the prosecution to full circle with of course the convictions of both.
And we will wrap it up. Astro chiming in, STS family, let's show the love for Phil, Scott, and Joel. Thank you. Followed by the one and only Baby Doll, STS fam for life. I love that. Followed by Linda Caputo with the STS and the heart emojis. Phil, Scott, and I feeling the love. And Lorna says love Fridays with Scott and Phil. Who doesn't love Scott and Phil? Agent Scott Duffey is director of Wilmington University's Criminal Justice Institute. He's a retired FBI special agent out of Delaware. He spent 5.5 years in Pennsylvania as a police officer, and now he's in Cape May, New Jersey, enjoying the beach. Scott, my final question. Do you still make sandwiches for your kids at the beach, or are you retired from that as well?
I've retired from that as well. They're on their own.
What a great life you live, man. One day I will be Scott Duffey in the following life, like Chad Daybell. He is America's most respected detective. His name is Fil Waters. He's a world expert on obtaining criminal confessions. He's taught these classes in Europe and around the globe. He is highly sought after, which is why he drives a Ferrari. He's investigated over 400 homicide cases, and he's also a Marine and the owner of Kindred Spirits Investigations. And he also starred in the show The Interrogator. And if you think your spouse is cheating on you, call Phil. He might be able to help. Catherine Regier, Kindness, Chat, Mahalo, Joel, and STS. Phil, your final thoughts. And I think people look to you as a father figure on this show. So any words of wisdom as we head into the weekend?
Well, since you've asked that question, I wish everybody a great weekend, first of all. But here's what I want to part with. That truth will always be truth if no one believes it. And a lie will be a lie always if everyone believes it.
Say that one more time, Phil. Say that one more time. Because I just told my kids, if your nose runs and your feet smell, you must be built upside down, I said to my kids. But I didn't quite say that one more time.
Well, parents are allowed to lie to their kids.
Okay.
That's the one caveat.
Oh, I feel much better. I feel much better now. No, say that one more time. That was important.
The truth will always be the truth if no one believes it. And a lie will always be a lie if everyone believes it.
I'm gonna have to go back and do the math on that. I'm gonna replay this, but I think I get it, Phil. Listen. Oh, by the way, I have to let everyone know. Sunday night, 7 p.m. Eastern time. This lady right here, my mom, will be live, and we're gonna do a show with psychologists, and we are working to get Rick Allen Ross back. He is an expert on cults to also discuss Lori Vallow Daybell's friends. A lot of their friends appeared to know what was going on, and yet didn't really step in or act. And the question is, as they say in South Carolina, why? So we will be examining that. And until then, huge thanks to Fil Waters and Scott Duffey. And love you, America. Love you, Cape May, New Jersey. Love you, Houston, Texas. Until next time, love you all.